world is on fire and there's this huge pandemic happening. And, maybe this is a time where other people are pausing to reflect on their life. Did I put good into the world today? And I think there were enough days where the answer to that felt like no to me, that I felt like I needed to change something. So I think that was a big takeaway from my time, was like the importance of communities and seeking out community, right? It's not something that always just, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger.
Welcome back to Tokyo State of Mind. As always, we're here to make you feel best about yourself and your life in Japan. Today, I have my dear friend Chris Edling, who is a writer, editor, and teacher from Columbia University, whom I personally know as a very wise, cool, spiritual person with a genuine interest in teaching and a beautiful heart, whom I'm so grateful to have as a mentor and a close friend. The story how we met should be the story how we met and like what Chris is doing, and it should be inspiring for many. But the main focus of what we're going to talk about is actually the lessons we learned in 2020. It was a very crazy year, not even in Tokyo, but in many places. So we decided that why not to have an amazing and beautiful conversation about not only what we have suffered from this year, but also what we have learned. So welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for participating.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's always a real pleasure to talk with you and hang out and have long discursive conversations about whatever it is that we happen to be talking about.
Yes.
So it's a real honor to be invited. Thank you so much.
I always share like the story of like this project and the story about you, that's why we're doing the podcast. I wanted to spread this story to as many people as possible, since I remember that even though I knew like what kind of project I want to do, like I wasn't really sure about my future plans. And at that time, a lot of my peers, they were going to master's degree, or they were pretty much following like the regular path. And I was at the time sure that that's not something that I want to follow. And I told you about this, and you told me about your story of you like being this rebellious person, like always doing what you wanted and like going against the flow, which honestly inspired me a lot. Like I felt like this story was this kick that I needed. And it still inspires me today, because at that time I didn't really have that much of a reference like to stories like this, when you just do something not considering the timeline or all this all the rules that society like imposes on like the idea that you should do something by a certain age. And from this point, I wanted to you to tell you about your story, like that one that you told me.
Yeah. No, I'm very touched to hear that, and it's I will say that from the position I'm in now, which is I'm a little older. I'm like 15 years out of college, and it was. Especially for those people listening to the podcast, if you're something like a teenager in your early 20s, or at this time in your life where you're feeling, I don't know. When I was that age, like when I was in university, I had a lot of anxiety, and I felt a pressure, mostly which I think I put on myself, which was I felt like I had to like figure out my whole professional life, right? And it was like I had to already know what I wanted to do, and then I had to start working towards it somehow at the age of 19. But of course, like it's a kind of a backwards way of thinking, right? Like usually in life we don't figure something, we don't figure out the second part and then we adjust the first part towards it.
Mhm.
It's like you have to do the first part to figure out what the second part
Mm.
is going to be, right? And for me, that's what a lot of college ended up being. So when I started college, I wasn't really sure professionally what I was going to do. I had some general sense that maybe I would um, go to seminary and become a priest because my uncle had done that, and he, for me, was a very influential person. And I was thinking about that for a while, but then by the time I reached my, I don't know, my second or third year of college, I think I knew that I felt that wasn't a good path for me.
Mhm.
Um, and so then I started to take classes in political science, and I really liked it, and especially the writing that went along with it. So um, I started thinking, well, maybe I'll go to law school, right? And that seemed like kind of safe and like this safe professional path. And it also would allow me to do what I think these days is called like social justice work.
Mhm.
When I was in college, I don't know if that term was as popular or was as like around as much, but this idea like you want to try to do something to make the world more just or equal or whatever it is, help people. So if being a priest wasn't going to work out, being a lawyer maybe could be another way to feed into this, right? Um, but then I did, in my junior year, I did a political internship. I did two political internships. And I kind of came away from those feeling like maybe this wasn't my crowd, like my crowd of people.
Mhm.
Um, and maybe it just wasn't a good fit for me. Like intellectually, I really enjoyed it, but um, it didn't seem like, I don't know, it didn't seem like a good fit. I don't know how else to describe that, but so it was in my senior year. I had this really good luck. I ended up quite by accident in a writing class, and the teacher was really great, and I really enjoyed everything that I was doing, and it was that thing of like I felt like I had found like my um, the thing that I had loved the most, which was writing. But what I didn't really consider until then was, that you can do something with writing as a job or as a
Mhm.
career, right? I always thought that writing was a skill that I would use as part of a career, like going and being a lawyer or being a priest and writing sermons for church, right? Um, so, but it was really in this class that, um, and the writing classes I took before it kind of led up to that. Also, was I started to think, well, maybe I should try to pursue writing. And I was also very lucky in that I lived in Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is a city where there are people who work as writers. Like that's a real thing that exists, and that was a big deal because like I, I wasn't originally from Los Angeles. I grew up in other towns and other cities. So like it, in a lot of places, especially not large cities,
Yeah,
there are just professions that don't exist so much, you know.
that's what I felt when I came to Tokyo as well. I was like, oh, I'm in a big city.
Yeah, I mean, did you feel this? I mean, I wonder for you, like, did you feel this in any way, like as a transition, like when you were in Bishkek or when you left
Mm.
Bishkek to come to Japan, like, was there something that you understood the world was different than you previously thought?
I think so, especially when it comes to stereotypes about like what people think about Japanese, like that um, there are always like something going on that you will think you will see in the media. You will see like your other foreign friends talking about it, but if you actually go deep, you realize that pretty much they are having almost the same issues as everywhere in the world. And I think that was the biggest thing. And the other thing is just also Tokyo is quite diverse. I mean, in the way that at least my surrounding is really diverse, and there are so many things that it's just like experiences that I never had before, like meeting people from the certain countries.
Mm.
Um, yeah, that definitely helped me to grow a lot, to understand. Um, to I think I even was started like to pay attention, like to even how the people, like to people's faces, like in the way that sometimes you just see by like on the person's face that they're just sad, like, or um, even they look different. You can catch the certain signs for certain emotions. So I think that this exposure to diversity gave me at one time understanding that everyone is different, but also everyone is the same, kind
Mm-hmm.
of this feeling. And also it's not even much of the form of what you're doing. Like there's so many different professions that you can pursue here, but and the form might look really attractive, like, oh, I can work as an actor, as a model, like as a writer. But at the end of the day, what I realized is that the the substance of what you're doing and the process, it's pretty much the same. It's like if you really like it, you can make it, and there are always hardships. If you don't like it, it's harder to do it. So I don't know, this was just like this exposure to diversity. That's something that I have noted, like helped me to realize many things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And this, I mean, I think there is, I mean, this is definitely true in Los Angeles and New York. I would assume it might be true there too, is if you are if you are doing this more, to use your word, kind of like rebellious life path, right? Where you're trying to, not walk down a path that's already been
Hmm.
really well cleared away, right? And really well marked, but you're trying to make one for yourself.
Hmm.
Um, it's a hustle, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, all of the creative people, especially that I met and worked with in Los Angeles, actors and writers and comedians and musicians and dancers, like everybody was hustling,
Hmm.
and it's not easy. It's definitely it's a different kind of work than maybe these more I think like more legibly defined professional paths, like if you're going to be a doctor or a
Hmm.
lawyer or do an MBA and then go into finance or something. Not to take away from those pursuits, also, like
Hmm.
they're also tough, they're competitive, and
Yeah.
certainly people work very hard. Um, but yeah, when you're trying to, I don't know, when you're trying to figure it out for yourself without that, um, I don't know, even necessarily knowing what you're supposed to be doing, right? Um, that could be tough. So yeah, so when I by the time I finished college, the only thing I had figured out was I really loved writing. I don't know if I thought I was like really good at it, but I felt like I was good enough that, and I liked it enough that I would keep working at it to get better, right?
Hmm.
And I think um, that was like a key thing. Like without one or the other of those, I think I might have shied away from it, right? Because you do have to have some, like you said, like a fire or a spark or something, right? You can't
Yeah.
just kind of like thoughtlessly just like, oh well, maybe I'll try this and let's
Hmm.
see how it goes. I don't know. It takes a bit of propulsion. So I spent like 4 years in Los Angeles after college, doing all these media and entertainment jobs, like in journalism and writing, producing. I worked as a DJ, which was a very fun job that I still kind of miss. I don't miss setting up the equipment because at that time, like technology was, you have these big speakers,
Bulky.
yeah, big and bulky, and like I worked for a DJ company that, God bless them, they actually hired people to like help set up the equipment. So I didn't have to do it all on my own, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still like, yeah, I don't know. It's tough work. So anyway, I did all these crazy jobs, and it was really fun, and I'm really glad I did it. And but I kind of got to a point where, I still had that thing of like, that thing of like wanting to make the world a better place, or wanting to like help people. And I do think it's true that people in media and the arts obviously like contribute to society. And
Yeah.
if you think about people who like make movies or television, telling these stories have a huge influence on culture and how people view themselves, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think in a very immediate sense, I was kind of coming home at the end of the day at a lot of jobs and just thinking, like, who did I help today? Like, whose life did I make better? Did I put good into the world today? And I think there were enough days where the answer to that felt like no to me, that I felt like I needed to change something, in kind of a big way, not just like a little adjustment. So and then there was this larger thing too of, I grew up in the U.S. I had only really been in the U.S. I'd never really traveled, and so I applied to Peace Corps. I was like 25 years old or something,
Just like
and
me right now.
yeah, so Peace Corps is something you should consider.
Yeah. That's such a good idea, by the way.
Yeah, think about it.
Peace Corp state of mind next time.
Yeah, but actually, this is like, not to put you on the spot, but like, I would love to ask you this question because
Yeah.
I feel like in a way, when did you finish college? It was 2000, was like 4 years ago.
Yeah. It was 4 years ago. Yes.
So you're kind of at the same place I was actually when I joined Peace Corps. And also you've been, you've already taken the first bold step of moving to a different country, which is good. But like, so where I was I had been doing all this fun, creative stuff, but I got to a point where I was like, I really feel like I need to try something different. And for me, that was, the other thing was there was the economic recession of 2008 had hit, and a lot of people were losing their jobs. I was working in a newspaper at the time. A lot of people at our newspaper had lost their jobs. And so I felt a kind of instability in my job. And I think that was part of it too. I thought, well, if my job isn't safe, then maybe this is a good time to consider a change anyway. So there was that external thing. But it's good background for us talking today because the world is on fire and there's this huge pandemic happening. And, maybe this is a time where other people are pausing to reflect on their life, right?
Oh, yeah.
But where are you with that? So now you're 4 years out of college. You've been doing various things for like some years. Where, like, I don't know, where do you find yourself in terms of like what you really enjoy about what you do? And is there something else? It might be something new that you're starting to think about, or maybe something old that you've kind of forgotten about and you're coming back to.
I like how this podcast is actually it's a podcast, but it's also a great chance for me to catch up with Chris and for Chris to catch up with me.
I know. I hope that's it. We can stay on topic more if you want to.
No.
I'm too curious to ask about you.
That's what I wanted. Because we're good friends, and it's my first time actually interviewing someone who knows me for that long as you. So that's what I wanted, actually, to have this ping pong thing.
Okay, good.
So yeah, thank you so much for the question. It's funny when you mention that doing all these fun jobs and and then coming back home. here in Japan, that's what I tried. I was doing a lot of different things. So maybe one day you will find me in a strange Japanese drama playing a police officer for 2 seconds.
Nice.
So it's just, and the funny thing is, like, I never thought it's gonna be featured, but then Tokyo is ridiculously small. So one of my Japanese senseis just one day called me and she's like, "Oh, so are you like quitting your studies because I saw you in the drama?"
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, "You saw me in the drama? Like, is it?" I just thought that, in my mind it was still like, okay, they just paying me money. I don't care where it goes. Like, it was nice job, so okay. Yeah, but it was for fun, and I tried a lot of different things like that. And you're right, like, trying a lot of things, it's really fun, but at the end of the day you're trying to make sense of it, of what's going on. It's like, it's nice, it's fun, you meet people, you meet things, but especially in a city as like such a dynamic city as like cities like Tokyo and Los Angeles, when nothing ever sleeps, nobody ever sleeps, right? You feel like it's an amazing and a lucky thing to meet so many people, but you just go home and you want to make sense of, like, what are the true people in your life, like who are your real friends, who are people that you want to keep connections with, not like not in terms of work and other things, but actually someone who actually appreciates you the way you are, and somebody who helps you go, as you mentioned, go back to yourself, which is a big thing. Yeah, so I guess right now, I definitely, like, through this crazy adventures, and which coronavirus actually provided me with, because it definitely gave me a lot of time to reflect and try out. My first reaction to corona actually was that, okay, everything is so fragile and so, like, fast, that you never know how long you're gonna live. Like, you never know how long are your friends, your parents are gonna live. Like, so why not to take a chance and try something that you always wanted? So for me, listening to the podcast was a really was a great way to like meet a lot of interesting people without actually getting to know them, because the podcasts are mostly about the deeper conversations, and I like talking, so I like I like connecting with different people and learning. Oh, is it a cat?
Hmm.
Right there.
Special
It's so
guest.
so cute. Yeah, I didn't realize we have two guests. It's amazing. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
1+1.
The next interview.
Next interview. Yes. I'm sorry, Chris. I feel like the cat is gonna get more views.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah, that's okay. No,
That's how
no,
it,
no, no
that's how
offense taken.
internet works. Cats and dogs
Yeah.
get more likes than people.
Yeah, fair enough. For me too. I'm much more likely to click on it.
Yes. So I definitely figured out that um, sharing stories is my passion. I love sharing
Mm,
stories. Like, I can do it like 24/7, because stories are amazing, and they help you to feel liberated from a certain type of thinking that you're used to, that you're taught to. And yeah, I guess I'm just on this kind of stage to figure out how to sustain myself through that, like, and how to, because I already have an amazing co-host like Katya, who is helping
mm,
me, so I have people around who are supportive. I just need to figure out how to make it a more scalable project. Yeah.
hmm. Well, when I was living in Los Angeles and I was doing all this writing, um, I had this really good fortune of one of the publications that I was submitting writing to. It was this big. It still is a big name publication, but one of the people who was working there as an editor, who I didn't know, was a total stranger to me. I wrote an email to them and I was saying, like, hey, I'm interested in working as doing this writing full time, and trying to make a career out of this. And I don't know what possessed me to, like, send this email to a person I didn't even know. In fact, I don't even think it was a person. It was like one of these emails that like it goes to a general mailbox. I was clearly looking for direction in my life.
Mm,
Just like putting a message in a bottle and like throwing it into the sea, right?
yeah.
But this very kind and generous person, whoever ended up getting the email, wrote me back and said, you know, a lot of us who do this, even those of us who work full time on this website as editors and writers, we have other jobs. Like this isn't
Mm,
our main source of income. Like
yeah.
we're teachers and we're editors, and they have all these different jobs. He's like, we do this on the side. This isn't our main source of income, but we all love what we do.
Yeah.
It's a passion project, and I think that was it was eye-opening for me in two ways. Like on the one hand, I saw that, oh no, I need to make money. Like I need to figure
I
out
know,
some way
right?
to pay the bills. Like I can't rely on this necessarily being my only thing that I
Hmm.
do. So maybe it wasn't going to be monetized for me, at least not in a way that was like sustainable. But the more positive side of this was I thought, oh, so that means no matter what job I end up having,
Hmm.
um, I can always write, right? I
Hmm.
can always be freelancing. I can always maybe as an editor be contributing to some of these websites and publications that I really love. And I mean that was 10 years ago or more than 10 years ago that I had that email exchange with that person. Um, but that continues to be true now. I mean, I think what we were seeing then was sort of the beginning of what's now called the gig economy, right?
Mm,
And like the freelance lifestyle. And here in the U.S. anyway, like that has progressed to a point where in cities like New York and Los Angeles, you have these workspaces that are just set up for people who are independent, gig contractors, and they're just doing this job and cobbling together this, I don't know, life that's divorced from like
yeah.
one full-time job at one big company or even one small company,
This is
right?
actually the place, this kind of place that you described. I visited thanks to like the people that I just recently met. I visited this kind of place recently in Tokyo. And I also
Mm-hmm.
have seen a lot of people doing that, that's for sure. There's still stigma about doing freelance in Tokyo. It's like, oh, like you need to be a proper adult doing a full-time job. Like it's not really something that is welcomed by a lot of people, but yet it's getting there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think it's the attitudes around that are shifting here in the U.S. too. I mean,
Mhm.
partially just because it is becoming so common, especially in some industries, right? Jobs that used to be full time or corporate or something like those positions just don't exist anymore.
Mhm.
Um, so, I mean, there's a larger here in the U.S. especially. There's a larger question to figure out around things like, so what do we do about healthcare?
Mhm.
Because a lot of freelancers, somehow have to hustle or struggle to figure out their health insurance, and that's a problem. But anyway, um, yeah. So you're, I don't know, like, do you feel confident as a young professional who's starting to figure out like what you really love and what you like to spend your time doing? Do you feel a kind of confidence that you'll be able to figure it out, or do you feel like you're going to have to find some other thing and like just keep pursuing this on the side? Or I don't know,
Mhm.
where's your barometer of your like feelings around this right now?
Well, I definitely like my project a lot and like what I'm doing, and I feel quite confident about it. But at the same time, I'm very open like to things because yeah, some I also open the room for the fact that so many things are gonna be different, especially now, like with coronavirus thing, and that's why I really wanted to have this like reflective session on like what kind of lessons were learned during this time, because I feel that, yeah, a lot of us had time to think about, um, no matter at what kind of stage in life we are, to think about what are we doing, like what can be done, like, and also understand how vulnerable everything can be, and how nothing really lasts that long.
Hmm.
So yeah, what do you think was the biggest lesson that you learned from the pandemic?
You know, I knew you were going to ask me this question, and I was thinking about it for a long time, and I've really been struggling to find an answer because um, look, this is I think for me the pandemic has been like my situation has been much easier compared to some other people. So like if I look at, for example, my job situation,
Mm-hmm.
um, so as a college teacher, I've been able to work entirely online and teach my classes online since it was February or March. I forgot when it was that we switched to online. Um, but so like I don't have this job where I have to go out into the world every day, and um, I live in New York City, and we've had rates of virus that have gone up and down over the last 9-10 months, and so in that sense, like I'm very fortunate, right? That my job hasn't been a source of risk for me, and it hasn't really been threatened. I mean, like I know people who work in other industries, or even other teachers who just uh, they've lost their jobs, or they have to take some risk of getting on a train, getting on a subway, and like being in a physical classroom with people, and like that hasn't always been considered a very safe thing. Um,
Yeah,
and I'm also lucky in the sense that in terms of risk groups, like I'm not older. As far as I know, I don't have like underlying health conditions, anything like this. So I don't know. So I think there are a lot of people who probably have been struggling quite a lot more during the pandemic than I have. So that's one thing. I think maybe like a takeaway is like just a kind of gratitude um,
yeah,
for certain things. Um, I think too, also in terms of my job, um, I really like teaching. I love being a teacher, and when you're stuck at home all the time, and so much of like, I mean, I didn't have like a very active like extracurricular life before the pandemic. Um, Actually, like a lot of the things that I like to do are things that a person can do alone, like reading or writing or something like that. So I don't know. I think for people I know who are more like they do more like group activities or more
mm,
social things, right? So that's a lot of that's been taken away in
yeah,
the pandemic, or it's changed to like online or to be socially distanced, or now we have to do it outside instead of inside or
yes.
whatever.
So many arrangements. Yeah, yeah. I couldn't go
Yeah,
to Aikido for 6 months, and it felt very like I was so like missing it. But at the same time, we managed to do some online like um, muscle training, and it was quite fun too. It was
yeah.
interesting how Corona made people just like shift and adapt in so many different ways.
But like, okay, so like, but for the social side of this, right?
Hmm.
So, what has been your experience of like? I mean, I should say I don't know what the environment is like
Hmm.
in Tokyo. Like, I don't know if people are meeting or if it's safe to meet or something. Like here in New York, there's been, um, I mean, I think quite a large attitude of let's be safe,
Mm,
let's not get together, let's not get together in
yeah.
groups, especially. But has your social life changed quite a lot, and have you made the change to like now you do Zoom hangouts with people instead of hanging out in person. Or I don't know, how has the social side of your life changed in the last year?
Well, in Tokyo, it wasn't definitely that strict because they were like, we recommend you not to meet, but people were still meeting up like till the point, even like, especially during the when the sakura time, like Hanami, people were just unstoppable. There were like full parks, and everything looked like there was no coronavirus because obviously there were also people not wearing masks in these gatherings. But when the numbers really got up, it became more strict. Parks were closed. Everything was our dorm. Like for example, we couldn't go to the kitchen because it was a shared area, so we were encouraged to stay in our own rooms and just go one by one and cook.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, in my case, it didn't really change that much because Tokyo wasn't really strict about that. But definitely, for a couple of months, it was just seeing my Aikido friends, for example, on Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah. And then like these activities where you are physically in a room with people, like Aikido, for
Mhm.
example, like, so did you just stop having classes or you did them on Zoom or how did that work?
So, because Aikido requires a partner, it
Right.
was not possible to do anything related to that, and you need an instructor to teach you the proper way of doing things, and that's why we just shifted to um, muscle training to not get out of the shape. So when we go
Mm-hmm.
back, we don't suffer that much because when I actually went back to the my first practice, my whole body was just aching because it was not used to this load, exercise load anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Um,
gratitude is a big thing.
yeah. Yeah. I will say that like I have heard from a lot of my my friends and colleagues who are writers that it seems like in a way like people in the profession of writing or in the habit of writing um, are in just in so many ways much more well prepared for this or less affected by it due to the already kind of very solitary nature of that work.
Mhm.
You know, I was in touch with a professional writer who I've known for years, who writes books, and you know, a lot of what they do is calling people to do interviews on the phone or keeping in touch with people by email or doing research online or in digital archives for the book or something. And like none of that has changed, you know?
Yes, because people
Um,
are always looking for connection, and writers and like especially if you work for the newspaper, like are always like watchdogs for um, information, for connecting people, and yeah, it's always there.
yeah, yeah. And so, like, I think, um, I mean, there's a lot of talk about the way that the pandemic is, you know, it's affecting everybody, and you know, the virus doesn't discriminate, and all of that. But I think it's equally true, or maybe more true, that you know, actually, the virus affects lots of different people in many different ways.
Hmm.
It's not. I don't
Yeah.
think it's the unifying experience that it's sometimes framed as. And when you look at different groups of people, and that's like you can group people as lots of different ways.
Hmm.
Um, but when you look at different groups of people, I think part of what we see is actually people are responding to this very differently and are impacted by this very differently. Some people have lost a lot, right?
Example, people have gained. Yeah.
Yeah, or it's been a slightly more neutral experience or something. So so I don't know. I mean, here in the U.S., I think there's a lot of inequality that exists in the country, and that's been true for a long time. And um, you know, the pandemic in a way has serves to highlight a lot of that inequality, right? So people whose lives are already on a kind of, you know, in a precarious or vulnerable place, um, you see how easily things can fall apart, if you don't have resources.
Exactly.
So I don't know. Is that true in Japan also? I'm not well versed enough in Japan to really know.
Well, here it's more, I think, definitely the people who were mostly affected by the thing is like tourists, um, tourist, like travel agencies, those companies that work with tourists because there were no tourists and people were
Hmm.
expecting for this income. And also, just like everywhere in the world, like vulnerable societies and like single mothers who it was already hard on them to take care like of their children, but and if they're also like, for example, if it's single mother from a travel agency, so she has no job and she has these
Hmm.
kids with whom she has to spend the whole time, and there's no, and but I think there were some programs actually supporting them. And at the same time, yeah, I feel like everyone definitely was affected. And in the news, they tell us that only 20% like of people reported on having their salary decreased. But I don't think anyone can really believe these numbers. So
Hmm.
it's definitely not true. Though it also stays true that a lot of companies that are working with technology, they definitely actually have earned more from the situation. So, which also brings me to the thing that even the definitely crisis can be an opportunity for some people, for entrepreneurs. So during this pandemic, I actually I have met so many entrepreneurs who were reporting on how Corona just crashed their plans, but exactly because Corona crashed their plans, they were able to come with better ideas and find better mentors or better stockholders, which was such a beautiful thing to hear about. In general, like entrepreneurs are already super positive, like and energetic people, but meanwhile, like knowing that something is actually going good for some people is very encouraging.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that in a parallel way, probably that's true for a lot of artists also. I mean, like I'm sure a lot of different kinds of art, like music and poetry, and a lot of innovation is going to come out of this period. Not
Hmm.
just in terms of reflecting on the crisis itself, but also how people how people make art and
Hmm.
share it with other people. I mean, for me, like one of the most interesting things to see has been seeing a lot of my comedian friends, because stand-up comedy is so. It seems like it's so much something where it's like you have to physically be in a room with
Mm.
with people and like standing on that stage,
Hmm.
and um, the feedback. I mean, a lot of people say stand-up comedy is not a one-way performance. It's this dialogue
Hmm.
between the performer and the audience, and yet in what seems to me the most impossible or improbable circumstances, you see comedians finding new ways to do what they do, and doing like online comedy clubs,
Yeah.
like the like Nowhere Comedy Club, and all these online venues have, um, they've found ways to continue doing what they do, and it's like
Right.
I couldn't have imagined that 10 or 20 years ago. I mean, it was already the case 10 years ago that comedians were doing a lot of things online, right? They were
Yeah.
like posting videos and people were
Right. Right.
already becoming famous, but um, yeah, it's just the was necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Right.
um, so yeah, and then in other fields too, so like I think there are people who started working remotely online
Hmm.
during the pandemic, who now they'll continue working remotely forever, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe companies will start to make more jobs available online, and as that, if that normalizes, and I think my guess is that it probably will, to some extent. um, you're going to see people building their whole lives in different ways,
That's
right?
true. It's already happening
So
here in Tokyo for sure.
are you seeing the thing in, like, so like here in New York, there's been a lot written about how people have like left New York City,
Mm-hmm.
and that's, I think, there are different, like, there are definitely a lot of people who have not left New York City.
Like you.
um, yeah, and maybe too much has been said about how, like, New York is. I don't believe that, like, New York is dead or any of this kind of like
Oh
crazy
my
rhetoric.
gosh. I cannot even imagine. I don't think New York and that can be even in one sentence.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's insanity. But there are people who like have moved and who have left,
Mm,
and who maybe won't come back. I think that's probably true. And some section of those people are people who they started working online,
yeah.
and they'll be able to keep working online.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, it's less expensive to live in a countryside, right?
Yeah.
Or a small town. So um, I wonder about the long-term effects like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. What are you seeing in Tokyo? Or like, have people been like vacating the cities, or has real estate gone up and down?
Not really. Like I didn't see much of an inflation. Um, I haven't seen it, but I know that a lot of people like like I guess for the negative effect definitely. Um, right now, Tokyo is dealing with increased cases of suicides, especially among females, because it proved to be true that females are more vulnerable to that because of the gender inequality. Like women are still getting less salaries, and especially
Mm,
women who are working in the field of entertainment, like the, the entertainment. But by entertainment, I mean host clubs,
mm-hmm,
so or bartenders. It's
mm-hmm,
getting really hard on them.
mm-hmm,
So yeah, and in general, when I think about the whole 2020 and like even besides coronavirus, I don't know, I feel like there's so many just deaths all around, not just suicides, but yeah, mostly I hear a lot about suicides, and I I think that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, because I wanted people to understand that everyone is dealing through like good and really hard times as well, so they could, like my sister just recently, she visited her classmate's funeral, and this guy, he when I was like 10 years old, I think, yeah, back when I was like a very little kid, I remember like seeing this guy, because he was my sister's classmate and I frequently was in their class, and there was just like this cute little boy, like always so polite, always so studious, and whenever my sister had some math assignments, she would always call him and he would always help her, just like this, I don't know, just this ball of cuteness and happiness. And then she tells me that this guy committed a suicide this year. It was just such heartbreaking for me, not just because I knew this person, but because I knew him as a kid, and I still have this child image in my head. And every time I hear about this kind of news, because of the pandemic, apparently he was going through a really, really bad case of depression, but nobody really nobody knew.
mm-hmm,
And I think the biggest lesson that I've definitely learned from um, not just Corona, but living also in Tokyo and like growing up in general and hearing all the stories, is that so many problems can be solved by people just speaking up.
mm-hmm.
because especially right now when people are disconnected, they're isolated in their homes, and so many, yeah, and like with domestic violence going on, it looks like it's just so easy to like fall into negativity and think that there is no one to talk to. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I guess that was the thing that I was definitely feeling a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, um, being connected to other people and feeling, I mean, whether you're physically alone or not, like feeling like being alone and feeling lonely are different, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I don't know, like I mean, especially, when you consider, um, for example, these so like tragic cases of suicide and other kinds of things too, right? Like there certainly a lot of people face depression, or struggles with self-esteem, right? Um, and there are, I don't know if, like, for me, like as a writing teacher, one of the things that I pay a lot of attention to is like not just what people say, but rhetorically how things are framed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, behind specific messages, like what are the larger assumptions or kind of attitudes that are conveyed, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the rhetorical, I don't know, sort of like norms of
Mm-hmm.
what people say, and like this is my personal opinion, and I would be interested to hear your opinion on this too.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I think, I don't know, maybe this is just my opinion, but there's something that can be very destructive about. There's a kind of rhetoric, I think it's especially popular here in the US, which is about like strength and toughness, um, like this idea that people should be strong, and strength, especially like a kind of individual strength,
Mm-hmm.
is something that like is to be admired and cultivated. I mean, you hear it in all of these like proverbs that people say, like, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, right? Which in a way kind of like lends it like
Yeah. Yes.
minimizes how hurtful like anything other than actual death or murder
Exactly.
is, right?
Yes.
And I think, I don't know, like, the kind of pressure people put on themselves and the way people like will sort of try to present themselves or feel pressured to present themselves as like, I'm tough, I'm strong, or I'm fine, you
Mm-hmm.
know, when they're not fine and when they're actually suffering, right? Like
Yes.
that kind of thing, which actually presses down
Mm-hmm.
the pain or the struggling, and like, turns it in on itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? As opposed to what could be this rhetoric of like, not like toughness and strength and like individual what resilience
Mm.
or whatever, but what actually could be a rhetoric of like connectedness and caring, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
this is such a nonsense idea that like, you know, tough individual people just like, I don't know, like,
Superheroes.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's like you said, like people do, you know, um, need to reach out, support each other, hear each other's stories.
Mm-hmm.
People, need like a sympathetic ear sometimes to listen of like, what are you dealing with right now?
Right.
Um, or a very honest account of their own suffering. So
Yes.
like, you don't think, like, if you're suffering, you don't think you're the only one. Like, everyone
Mm.
else is okay, everyone else is happy,
Yeah.
everyone else is doing fine, but just, oh, like me, like miserable weak me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it just compounds it. So I don't know, but like maybe it's different where you are. I don't know what like the
Yeah.
rhetorical attitudes are where you are, but I find this like
Yeah.
individual toughness rhetoric we have in the US is so
Mhm.
like, I don't know, it's so useless in a way.
I totally agree with you because just yesterday I had this conversation with my friend when we were on the train, and it was a long, a long way back home. So we had like 1 hour and 30 minutes of discussion, like about how childhood shapes us in a way that, like, for example, even I have still the struggles that to present myself like in a certain way because that's how I was raised. Like, because my dad would always be upset if he saw me crying. He would say, this is ugly, this is not how it should be, this is showing your weakness, do it somewhere far far away from other people. And so every time, so I could never like come up in front of my dad like having tears, because I knew that his response will be super negative.
Mm,
and and that's the way how he was raised. That was also like you never would come and hug him and say everything okay, because the times were hard, and people didn't, I don't know, some, I'm not saying that everyone, but I guess people around him didn't do that for him, and that's how it worked for my family. And at the same time, I feel that not it's not only just that, but just as you said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I guess the pandemic situation, because of pandemic, people started consuming media even more,
hmm
and sometimes it's not a very healthy consumption. But my way of spending my time was, let me just watch all the shows that I enjoyed watching as a teenager and see how different I look at it right now. And then I just got myself realizing that half of that was so, even more than half was so toxic, and
mm,
so, and just was normalizing so many things that now I consider like really really bad.
hmm
And even like the songs, the lyrics, like if you pay close attention, it's like they are basically normalizing the rape, for example, or
hmm
they are normalizing this bad attitude towards certain people.
hmm
So yeah, it's like, you know, it's, and it also can be debatable because at the same time, that was not okay for the majority. It's now we're, I guess, progressing in some ways, so we're looking at the different glance. But yeah, there's so much out there that I found incredibly like toxic for sure.
hmm Yeah. And like you mentioned too, like there, I mean, I know I know of some cases here among people I know in the U.S. Also, these like very sad cases of recent suicides that have happened within the last year or so, um, and like to look at um, the stories or the narratives of like the lives of some people, like where that ends up happening, you see like these kind of like factors stacking up one on top of each other, right? So sometimes it's like losing a job, right? And or having a kind of like addiction with drugs or alcohol, right? Um, Sometimes it's being kind of isolated, losing touch with people.
Hmm.
Um, Very often, if people get sad, they kind of withdraw, right?
Yeah.
And all these things, and it kind of starts to add up, and you think, well, like, if that saying of like what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
so all of these bad things that are happening are supposed to make you stronger. It's like
Mm-hmm.
when actually like this can be exactly the road to a very serious kind of like debilitating
Yeah.
sadness and isolation and all of this. It's like, I don't know, like I hope that I don't know, people have been saying this for years, I guess, but
Mm-hmm.
I hope that if something good comes out of this pandemic times, it might be a reassessment of
Yes.
like some of these maybe more like abstract and deep-seated attitudes that we hold about strength and weakness, about uh, if we think of ourselves as individuals as opposed to part of this larger network of humanity, right? And how much like people, our lives do affect each other,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, um, yeah, for sure.
I also think that what most people also like underestimate is like, you know, it's also related to what you just said about um, isolation and like people um, being detached. I think one of the thought that I definitely caught myself this year, also like myself not doing it properly, but and now I'm trying to work on it, is it's so important to not just be a good person and to give love, but also be able to receive love, because sometimes you're just so, oh, let me just like help everyone and be nice and kind, but then actually someone is nice and kind to you, is like something is wrong, and it's not a good thing. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
good thing. It's just you're and it's not like you're not receiving it, but you're also hurting the other person who actually wants to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's true. Like it's that has to be normalized too, right?
Hmm.
Like the giving and the receiving of care and warmth and all of this. Yeah. Yeah. There's something I was going to ask you, and I
Hmm.
forget what it was. I mean, do you feel like there are other things that you've learned about yourself or the world, like as the world has been different in the last 6 to 10 months?
Hmm. Definitely, yeah, so many things. And well, I guess one of the things is, so as you know, like I'm working on this podcast with my friend, and I'm also meeting a lot of different like people. And what I learned from like, so, but for example, with um, Katya, like, and with other like close friends that I have here, what I figured out that like every relationship that you have like in your life is so unique and different, so you cannot really like measure up one up to another one.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes like everything interesting is that you don't really have to agree to appreciate each other,
Mm-hmm.
because actually it's actually exciting when like for example, I don't agree with some of my friends, but then some nice ideas born out from there, like from this disagreement. Because I
Mm-hmm.
feel that a lot of people um think that, oh, you have to just like understand each other on every like in every single aspect for things to run perfectly, be it like a relationship or a friendship. But in reality, what I experienced is that it's not even about like the what you're talking about. It's just everything comes from the deep sense of respect toward each other, even if you have different opinions, and even if you have like different experiences and values. It
Mm-hmm.
all comes from just being, yeah, paying respect to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that reminds me a lot of to go back to something we were talking about earlier. This transition that I went through in 2009 when I moved from Los Angeles to Armenia when I joined the Peace Corps. Um, One of the biggest ways that that changed my life, aside from all the ways that are very obvious, like living in Hollywood compared to like living in this village in in this small country, um, was when I was living in Armenia. In so many ways, I was living kind of like very deeply and wonderfully embedded in communities of people, right?
Mm.
So my village was a community that I belonged to. The the group of Peace Corps volunteers, like
Hmm.
that also was a community, and that feeling of kind of belonging to a group of people. And by the way, this was like these were totally new communities for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
And
I
absolutely
wasn't.
different from you also, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this was like nothing about me had any contact
Mm-hmm.
with, Armenia. I mean, I lived in Los Angeles, where actually there are a lot of Armenians, which which is the funny thing, is like my dentist and my car mechanic, and
Kim
I knew a
Kardashian.
lot. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There are plenty of Armenians in Los Angeles, but in my life there, like I wasn't part of an Armenian community there. And when I went to Armenia, I just like showed up as this like person from outer space, basically, and and very quickly became like I came to feel like a very strong sense of belonging
Mm.
in the community I lived in, and that I didn't know it. I think before I went there, and maybe I didn't even
Mhm.
like realize it while I was there. But in retrospect, I saw what a big impact that had on me compared
Mhm.
to my life in Los Angeles. Because like
Yeah.
in Los
Yeah.
Angeles, I had friends for sure.
Mhm.
Um, I would say I had maybe a lot of professional networks, right?
Mm. Which is
So
different. Yeah.
which is different. Like a network compared to a community
Yes.
is a
Yes.
very different thing. So I think that was a big takeaway from my time, was like the importance of communities
Mhm.
and seeking out community, right?
Mhm.
It's not something that always just,
Yeah.
it doesn't just organically happen. Um,
Exactly. Yes.
so like when I was leaving Peace Corps in 2012, I decided to go to graduate school. And obviously there are lots of reasons a person might decide to go to graduate school, but for me, very sincerely, one of the reasons I wanted to do it was I I learned in Armenia the importance of being part of a community, and I didn't want to come back to the U.S. and uh, lose that.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and I had this kind of fear that if I came back and I just like got a job
Mhm.
and I lived somewhere, that it would be hard to find a
Mhm.
sense of community. And I felt like if I were in graduate school, like a university would be a more likely place to like
Mhm.
find community. And that, fortunately for me, that ended up being um, true. Like I don't know if it's true for everybody, but in my case, like graduate school was a place where I found again like several really great communities to be part of, and that made a big difference. But I mean, I remember talking to you about this
Mhm.
in your own time since you moved to Japan,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
like for you, since you got there until now,
Mhm.
what has been your development of like finding community, or like feeling a sense of belonging
Mhm.
in this place that you're not from either, but now
Yeah.
now it is where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I I will never stop. Like, I'll not get tired of like stressing how my Aikido community was a big like game changer in the way that it just like happened organically, that people in that community just take me the way I am, and even though we have like huge cultural differences, it's just there. I just feel I'm there in this community. And also recently I found like another community, like at this dormitory where my um, friend Katya lives. And yeah, by the way, hi guys, if you're watching this. And um, I also realized that community, you don't really have to like live at the same place as them. You can just meet up like once in a week, and just anyways you still feel those warmth and the support. Plus, it also made me realize how much your own initiative is important, because sometimes there's just like leadership is so important in this way too. Like people always tell about how leadership is important at work, but leadership is also equally important in the communities. Sometimes like it just takes one like person to take the initiative and create a community also. So because not everyone wants to be a leader, not everyone wants to take the initiative. And I feel like right now I'm definitely in a really good place.
That's good. Yeah, I bet it's especially good to hear that because I know like where you live is like an urban place,
Yes.
right? And I don't know, like I feel like I mean I'm sure it's possible to live in a small community and to
Mm-hmm.
still feel like alone or invisible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, in my own adult life, I feel like my and this is totally subjective maybe, but like the places I have most quickly found feelings of like community or belonging or something actually have been like some smaller places, right? So the village I lived in Armenia, I thought actually when I lived in Bishkek was like a very comparatively a very easy place to find a
Mm,
sense of like community. It was, I mean, Bishkek is such a great city in so many ways, and I have lots of positive things to say about both Bishkek and Kyrgyzstan as a place. But comparing that to like the large American cities where I've lived as an adult,
mm,
like Los Angeles and New York,
yeah.
um, yeah, it's been different. I mean, part of that is just my own
Yeah.
position, right? Like
Yeah.
being an expat, being like the weirdo foreigner, right?
Weird foreigners are always the best.
And that's a kind of like there's a lot of like kind of a privilege that goes with that,
Yeah.
right?
There are a lot of cards you can play with it. Yeah.
Yeah, but but I think it also like I don't know. In my case, like it. I mean, there's in Peace Corps and in Kyrgyzstan too. It was like there's some gender aspect of that, right?
Mm,
Like there were certain definitely like advantages I had as a man, you
mm-hmm,
know, like what is expected of me,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and all of that, and other things too. But yeah, and also just the tremendous like I don't know. I don't I don't like broad generalizations, and I always like chase my students not to make them. But like a couple of generalizations I found to be very true is like a big like warmth and hospitality of people both in Armenia and in Kyrgyzstan. You know, I was always very touched by that, whether I was in a city or in a village. It was
Yeah.
just such
People
a
just feed you all the time.
yeah, and just I mean, like we were talking earlier about rhetoric, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like the attitudes that are framed by what people say. Like there were so many people I met who would say like, "Oh, well, we treat you as our son or as our
Mm,
brother or something like this," right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like that. The underlying idea behind that is like you're one of us,
Oh
or
yeah.
we're going to protect you, we're going to take care of you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think like that, I mean, especially because in those cases I'm like I am a foreigner, and like a lot of these ways we think of identity, like I don't have like something in common with
Mm-hmm,
people, right?
mm-hmm.
But it was the rhetoric around it was like no, like we're going to take care of each other, we're going to take care of you. um,
Yeah.
and I think um, I don't know, like recognizing a kind of like in a way a weakness or a vulnerability
Yeah.
I did have as a foreigner.
I think
Right.
actually a very special feeling of like you realize that um, you are like pretty much a guest in this country, but these people make you feel like home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, for me, I guess one of the big things in my life was that I was always like looking for home. Like I didn't feel home at home, so I had this idea of a home as a like physical place, like, or maybe I will move to a certain country and it's gonna be my home because I will feel really really happy there. But then as I grew up older, I begin to realize that home is not a physical place at all. It's all about the people around.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so when I was growing up, my family, we moved around a little bit
Hmm.
within the United States, but like we lived in different towns and cities. And I think for people who grew up in this slightly like nomadic way,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, I think that that feeling of like, do you like how you define home and how
Hmm.
you define belonging,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Like, like who, like what do I belong to? Um, it's if you move a lot, um, I think it becomes very clear how much it's not like yeah, it's not a physical place. So much of it is about like relationships, people, all of
Yeah.
that kind of thing. The things that can stay with you if you do uproot yourself and go from one place to another,
Hmm.
right? Because yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do know that there are like people who are very connected to where they're from
Hmm.
in a way that quite frankly I'm not, or maybe like I'm not able to be because I've spent my life in different places.
Hmm.
Um, but but yeah, I think I don't know. It goes back to what you were saying too earlier about you don't have to agree with everybody, right?
Right.
I think how people understand like who my friends are and what my community is like,
Hmm.
it doesn't have to just be like these nominal things of like, well, it's just the people who agree with me,
Yeah.
or it's just the
Exactly.
people who look like me or think like me or
Yeah.
are even of my same age or something like
Hmm.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
What can bring people together as communities is can be very different from that.
Right. And that's the thing that I'm always trying to teach, like the kids that I meet at high school, is that even if I'm older than you, it doesn't mean that we cannot like openly talk about things. Like, let's be friends. More than anything, it's important to be like to understand that there's just another human being in front of you, and like just take away all the age, gender, social status, and talk to a person first of all. So, and I guess like this is one of the most rewarding experience to have, especially like when you meet, when you are able to teach that to younger generation, because I feel especially I don't right now I feel so bad for them. They are right now in this growing up in these uncertain times, like they didn't even get to experience anything.
Hmm.
And then coronavirus, and they're just like, oh my gosh, like they're seeing their parents freaking out, they're seeing like the educational system going crazy. So
Hmm.
that's definitely something that I yeah I want to keep on doing, is like just to meeting these people, and like and in generally just appreciating the people to people connection. And in
Hmm.
that way I'm definitely thankful for this friendship that I have with you. So because yeah, it's also a very special connection. And
Yeah,
so
for me
it's like
too.
no matter like when and how long we don't really like see each other like this, or like I feel always connected with you. So you're one of my people that I feel home with. So
Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah, no, feeling's mutual. It's I'm always happy. Like, I mean, I think in a way, even when you and I were first getting to know each other, all those years ago, it felt just I don't know, like very quickly a kind of like uh, comfortable and like sort of like I don't know. A friend of mine likes to say like you find your people,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. Finding your
Um,
people is important.
and
Yes.
so like and you can I think very often that's something that you can detect very quickly
Yeah,
when you
that's
meet
true.
somebody who's one of your people. And I remember like when I met you, I'm like, oh, like she's one of my people, you know. um, and there's some I don't know. I'm sure that social scientists or people who are smarter than I am can probably like pick apart what goes into that, right?
Mhm.
Um, but you definitely like it when you see it,
Yeah.
and that's been true of a lot of people who I've been fortunate to meet and have in my life. Is just that there's that, I don't know,
It
it's not just
clicks.
chemistry, it's something else.
Right, right. Thank you so much for like sharing all these amazing stories. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And please, like, guys, let me know, like, in the comments, what was the most challenging thing for you to go through in 2020, and what were the lessons, because I'm always excited to learn more about like the lessons people learned, because they're always so different and so interesting to read. So we'll really appreciate more stories and comments from you. Always like share, subscribe, and let us know if there's any certain topic you want to talk to. I'll be always happy to bring you new guests, and sometimes the surprising guests like Chris. So thank you so much for always watching us. We will be happy to provide you the content in 2021, as always here in Tokyo with Katya and Kamida. So see you next year. Happy New Year. Bye bye.